Welcome to the Hustler's Guide to Flow. I'm your host, Marcia Miatke, and I'm taking you into the minds of some of the most incredible leaders in the medical, research, business, and yes, even spiritual fields to equip you with powerful insights and practical strategies to level up in business and in life. The next level version of yourself starts now. I'm so excited to bring back relational alchemist Stefanos Sifandos. You may remember Steph from episode 3 where we talked about masculinity and the art of conscious communication. That episode was a favorite amongst listeners, so if you missed it, make sure you go back and check it out. In this episode, Steph and I talk about trauma, trapped emotions, and different healing modalities. Guys, it will become evident when listening to Steph that his energy, wisdom, and the way in which he integrates Eastern wisdom and Western psychology and the breadth and depth of his training is truly facilitating transformational change in the lives of his clients. Make sure you check out the show notes for links to his programs as well as his video, Don't Man Up, Man In, an absolute must-watch for both men and women. Hey, Steph, welcome back to the show. I'm so excited to have you here.
Likewise, Marcia, super excited to be here.
Awesome. So I'm going to jump right in and ask you if there's any quote or mantra that you live by.
Yeah, there's quote, not so much or so many, but the mantra of willingness for me. And I say this so often, and I almost hate to be repetitive, yet it's so important. It's something that's deeply shaped my life and has carved my path. And before that deep connection to willingness, I really was very lost. I really wasn't connected to my truth. And I was behaving in complete misalignment, which was with what was authentic for me. And essentially, I was just unwilling to face fears and pains. And I was unwilling to go to the places that held so much treasure for me in wisdom and teaching and learning. And so for me, that willingness, I wake up every day and I wake up every morning and I sit with myself and I ask myself, where am I willing to go today that I haven't gone before? What am I willing to look at today that I haven't looked at before? What am I willing to celebrate today? What am I willing to really focus on today? That's going to require focus and attention and depth of presence and maybe me getting uncomfortable. What does it take for me to be the person that I wish to be in this world, the expression of that in movement, the momentum of that in the world? So willingness for me is everything.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And it's so apparent in your content as well. Like when I like to, bring someone on, I really like to delve into their content. And that mantra of willingness is so apparent in what you do because of the places that you go. You know what I mean? So a lot of people like to really stick to a certain place. And what I really appreciate about your content is you look at the surface stuff, but then you're like, okay, yeah, but what's deeper than that? When you look at masculinity, you look at, okay, well, what's the strength, but then what's the vulnerability? And so that's really demonstrating your willingness. And guys, I'm going to share something with you that I don't even know if I've definitely never shared this with you. Maybe Dan has, but so Steph was referred to me by a friend, and in passing, my relationship with Dan was really new at the time. And in passing, I was literally just passing him. I was like, oh, I have an interview later today. And I said, with a guy named Steph. He's like, oh, I know of this guy. I follow his work. He's really amazing. And he's like, I reached out to him a long time ago. And, and at the time he was looking to work with a coach. And obviously I really supported that. And he had talked to a few other people and I was supportive, but I never really had an opinion. And then you and I had our conversation and then we sat down later and we had a chat and he said, I feel really called. I need to work with someone. I really need to do this work. And I felt a connection with you. I was like, he was like, I really feel called to work with Steph. And I'm like, yes. I never wanted to tell him what to do, but it was the first where I got intuition that I'm like, you are going to get the most out of this relationship because I think what he wanted to, and this is very much in the masculine, he said, well, I want to evolve, so maybe I need to have a business coach. And I'm like, that's awesome, but I think there's probably like more foundational work that you could do that's really going to like elevate you as a person, and then the business stuff will kind of flow. And so that's months ago. And I just want to thank you, Steph, for the work that you have done with him, because it has been transformational in our relationship. You know, obviously Dan has been willing to do the work and all of that, but our relationship has not been like smooth by any means. You know our relationship very well, and we've had lots of things come up, and it's been challenging at sometimes, but he has shown up in a way that like has blown me away. And I know from talking to him and just observing that it is a result of the work that you've taken him through. And he has so much love and respect for you. So I wanted to share that, the context of how we know each other and all of that. And yeah, I just wanted to thank you for the work that you've done with him.
Oh, well, it's very deeply received. Your words are bringing tears to my eyes, that's for sure, because I think about, and I remember, you know, Daniel is one of those men that is very willing and he is very ready. And, you know, I'd love to sit here and take a great deal of responsibility, and while I very humbly accept and receive your kindness, he's a man that has just decided to really venture into the unknown and say, I've had enough of pain that I've been inflicting on myself and I'm ready to do something about it. And he has really, you know, I've just shined a torch on some of those places within him that he couldn't see, but he's gone all in. From our first session, I remember we went deep immediately. When we speak to depth and we speak to that, it's almost transient. It's a transient term. What I mean by that is, again, a willingness to face the demons that lurk within us, that lurk inside of us, that the attachments to past patterns, the attachments to past behaviors, to experiences that we've interpreted a particular way that actually impact and influence unconsciously how we behave consciously in the world without us even knowing. And his willingness, his courage to go there and to really make changes and honor you and honor himself and honor the relationship as a third entity during that process has been so inspiring for me, so fucking powerful, really, to witness that. And it inspires me to go and not so much educate myself more, that's part of it, but to deepen my own personal practice so that I can serve others at a more profound level because of the way people show up, not so much for me, but for themselves I'm very blessed in my presence. And so whilst I humbly receive that, it's you were right when he has really showed up. He really has showed up. Yeah.
Yeah. And see, I even love your response, and that's because that just demonstrates where you're coming from. You know what I mean? It's not about you. It's always about the other person. And you're and how you described it was you're shining a torch in the places where he couldn't see. So you helped him go from like tunnel vision to full vision, have a full perspective of what's happening. And it was so funny because like in full transparency, like I knew I wanted to share that with you. And I was like, am I going to be able to say it without crying?
Inverse, I cried instead.
No, I like practiced yesterday. I'm like, okay, I think I can pull this off. Because, you know, your relationship is so, you know, critical. And Dan and I have had really, you know, less than ideal relationships in the past. And so we really wanted to honor it. And, you know, I'm doing the work on myself so that I can show up as my best version for him as well. And so I think what you were touching on there in terms of Dan's willingness to go in and say, like, I don't want to feel this pain anymore is a really beautiful segue into what I wanted to discuss with you today, which is healing from trauma. So first of all, just so that people don't tune out when they hear trauma, I find a lot of people are like, oh, well, I wasn't raped, so yeah, I'm good. I don't have trauma. Can we get some like understanding about like what is trauma? Like what could be considered trauma?
Yeah, the trauma resides on a spectrum, and it's very difficult. I mean, the human condition interprets trauma on that spectrum. And so when we look at intense sexual abuse, or maybe we hear a story of someone being chained in a basement from the age of 2 to the age of 25, and they've been massively sexually molested and physically abused. And yeah, that's very intense trauma and that's extremely unique case. well, maybe not so unique in some areas. And it is very difficult. Trauma is such a subjective area. And so an example of very deep trauma is, firstly, it's how we interpret an event or an experience or a set of experiences, and then how we interact with that at an emotional level, at a visceral level, at a feeling body level, and a mental spiritual level as well. And the effect that we allow those experiences or that experience to have on us. Trauma can be PTSD as well. So you can somewhat use, well, you can, because post-traumatic stress syndrome or the PTSD is an after effect of experiencing an extreme or volatile set of circumstances. But trauma can be, an example of trauma can be this. This is a really interesting one, is you have a young, I'm going to use a man as an example specifically. You have a young man, a boy that grows up in a very affluent, very wealthy household, a very wealthy part of society, has access to abundant resources, goes to the best schools, comes home on a daily basis and says, "Hey mum, hey dad, I got 92 or 93 on my test." And the immediate response of the father or the mother is, "Oh, why didn't you get 99? Why didn't you get 98? Instead of, "Oh, amazing," or reinforcing that, or whatever it may be. And that compounds over time, and that can lend itself to a very low sense of self-worth, hyper-competitiveness, this needing to prove to maybe father or mother, this sense of abandonment. And depending on how that child interprets that and what he does with that, it can send him down a spiral, maybe drugs, maybe alcohol, maybe this just hyper-competitiveness where he's in this constant state of stress. He doesn't feel good about who he is. He doesn't trust himself. And so trauma is a tricky one. But what happens is when we discount our pain or we discount our experiences, we cannot deal with them in an effective manner, because we're basically saying, "I'm fine, I'm okay, there's nothing quote unquote wrong with me." And first of all, you're not broken and there's nothing wrong with you. However, when we say, "I'm okay, I'm fine, there's nothing for me to work through or move on or feel," that's not necessarily true, because we're discounting ourselves. We're in that state of high comparison. And so our trauma is our trauma. We can't compare. It's very difficult to do that. It's very difficult to compare the trauma of a repetitive sexual abuse victim to someone that's been in war and then was in a concentration camp or was captured by the quote unquote enemy for 7 years and they were tortured. How do you compare that? I mean, someone can walk out of that and be completely fine if they are really grounded in their own sense of self prior to. There's so many variables. The point around trauma is, if you were affected by unconscious forces that are attached to an experience in the past that you've had, and the unconscious forces are in the now, and you're not functioning at the level that you want, you're experiencing despair, you're experiencing disparity and disconnection in relationships, you have a low sense of self-worth, you're not happy with life and where you are, you're in constant drama, that's something that you need to deal with. That can be a trauma or a pain or an unresolved fear. It's unresolved stuff that lends itself to causing pain in the present. And so we have to deal with that stuff. We all want freedom, but we can't get to freedom. We can't get to, people say, "Oh, just forgive your perpetrator," or "forgive the situation," or "forgive." And that's all great. I agree with that. However, there are many stages that come before the forgiveness. And one of them is feeling in fullness. Because if we don't feel in fullness, the suppressed expression of that experience, what happens is forgiveness is tokenistic and false. And so we have to be able to not relive. It's not about reliving the trauma, because that's not necessarily healthy. It's about feeling what was suppressed in that time. An example could be this. We'll use sexual abuse, and then I'll stop, of course, because I'm going on and on. But we use sexual abuse. Generally, when we're abused in any way, physically abused or we're violated, physical, sexual as an example, we disconnect. The mind disconnects from the body. And so I was reading a story a couple of days ago about a woman that was being sexually abused, and there was a little hole in the wall, and every time she would be sexually abused, she would transport herself into that little hole in the wall so that she would be disconnected from her body. And so she's not feeling the pain and the trauma of what's happened. Now, it doesn't mean she has to relive that experience in order to move past it. It means that she has to release the suppressed feelings and expression that is trapped in the body. We register experiences cognitively through our brains, and we also register them through the body. There are 40,000 sensory neurons in our heart alone. There are neurons and neurites in our gut as well. And so we register trauma particularly, or negative or very harmful or hurtful experiences at various levels. Understanding them and releasing them from the mind is one aspect of that. We have to also release them from the body. So there comes in somatic therapy. There comes in psychosomatic or sexual somatic therapy. There comes in breath work. There comes in various levels of psychosomatics and body work that we can do to help release that pain. And then making a cognitive acknowledgement, we then are able to fire new neuronal mapping in the brain, and we begin to create a new biophysical, biological version of self, a new psychological, spiritual, and emotional version of self. But there are layers to this. And so I hope I've gone and answered your question somewhat.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I really, really appreciate your answer because it totally resonates with me. And I loved your example of choosing someone that, on the surface, we wouldn't expect to have trauma. So there's like an affluent boy, he probably does all like the great sports, and his parents probably support him in all the extracurricular and doesn't have any stress perceived from the outside. And that trauma can be these little seeds of self-doubt and lack of worth that are really, it's the unconsciousness of our parents or our whoever around us that creates this feeling of unworthiness. And that can equate to trauma in the same way that someone who's experienced some severe physical trauma can be as well. And I love we can't compare them. You just can't compare people's trauma. And the other thing I think that we need to consider is a lot of us, our trauma was before the age of 7, where we didn't have the cognitive ability to recognize and to decipher that this is this other person's, unconsciousness, or this is this other person's wounding that they're now projecting on me. We internalize it and make it about ourselves. So I love that. And then you discussed the notion of when we don't deal with this work, it becomes trapped emotions in our body. And then we can't really perform at our highest level because we're suppressed. So I love that response. And I'll go straight into, and I think you kind of touched on it a little bit, was like the type of work that you do specifically around helping people overcome the trauma.
Yeah, so I just want to touch on something that you said, which was really interesting around that sort of 0 to 7 age. At that young age where our brainwave state is not in a state, it's not in a high functioning state of beta or alpha, and more beta. It's where it's overanalyzing, future anticipating, understanding, recognizing. And so you're right, we don't interpret and then are able to justify or understand at a deeper level what's actually happening. We just feel it for what it is and the pain of that. And that's really interesting. And so, when I'm working with people, I definitely go back into childhood. It's not always necessary for everyone. However, the majority of people that I work with, patterns that they have now in their life that's not serving them, hence why they're with me. Well, there's 2 reasons why people work with me. I just should clarify this. One, generally they're either coming from a really deep place of pain and suffering, and they're just really struggling in life. It's like, fuck, I'm done. Like, I don't know what to do. I need help. I'm really done. They've taken it to the nth degree, right? And I've been there many times myself. I know what that's like. And then there's other people that are quite high performers, but they're really quite grounded in their psyche and in their emotional being. They've actually done some deep work, and they're really coherent in their being. And they come to me and they say, I want to take myself to the next level. I know I can't do it on my own. I want intimate support and guidance. Let's do this. And so there's 2 quite different people, right? The archetypes, so to speak. The former is, it's generally with those people, I'm taking people back into patterns that they've established at a very young age that are lodged in their psyche and lodged in their unconscious, conscious self. And we sort of start unraveling that. And there's a process. I use very many different modalities, but there's a process to unraveling that. And even for the latter, the high performers that are really grounded and stable in their being, they still have patterns that are stopping them from moving to the next place. I have patterns. You have patterns. We all have patterns. So I uncover stuff every day, nearly every day at least, with where I'm at. I mean, I want to try and give you an example now. I'll give you a really honest example. So I was good old social media trap. That's another conversation. It was in the vortex of the social media, and I got into comparison. And I got into comparison about really disliking how this man was behaving on social media. And really, when I inverted that and I started looking at my projections, I was seeing that how he was behaving is an aspect of me. He was behaving as a victim. He was speaking as a victim, and he was getting all of these accolades from people, and they couldn't see his expression of victimhood. And I thought to myself, I started being critical, hypercritical towards him. And I stopped. And it was only a couple of minutes. I stopped and I said to myself, oh, or someone's happening here. This isn't, yeah, there was jealousy. Like I was being very jealous. I was being hypercritical, and I was then hating on myself for being jealous, and I was getting angry at myself for being jealous and being upset. And this guy's doing so well, yet he's false and he's not being real, and can't people see? And I had to take a breath. And what I was seeing in him was exactly how I've been in the past, and how it's a part of me when I'm under pressure, or I'm in extreme intensity, or I'm having a quote unquote bad day. And what I was hating in him, I was hating in myself. And I went through a process of self-forgiveness and feeling that. And I had tears. And I started realizing that it's still haven't come to full peace. There's another level of peace that I can come to. So I need to work through that now. I need to work through that externalized projected jealousy. I need to work through that, fuck him, he's not good. Or, because then I get angry and I get hyper aggressive. Internally, it's more hyper aggressive. It's a hyper aggressive attitude that I have internally. And that's really hard to admit. I don't like the term jealousy. I have a trigger around it, but that's my stuff, because I'm not, ultimately, if I keep peeling that back, let's get real, because if I was my own client, I would be looking at my own sense of self-worth. Now, this makes perfect sense. I'm experiencing this right now because I'm up-leveling myself. I'm in a process of my life where, honestly, it's everything in my life, internally and externally, is just growing at such a rapid rate. So I'm hitting that glass ceiling. Am I able to go through that? Am I able to do what I want to do? Am I able to serve in the way I want to serve? Am I smart enough? Am I good enough? Am I wise enough? Am I able enough and capable enough? So my self-worth I'm questioning my own self-worth right now, because I'm in a space that I've never really been before. And so that's why it's coming up. Low self-worth. The ego doesn't want to hear that. So it's easy for me to project and start focusing on what others are doing wrong, as opposed to what I could be healing or observing with kind compassion and radical acceptance and forgiveness within myself. And so then I go through the process of feeling all that, going through all the times where I first felt that, where I really felt that intensely. How did I deal with it? Who was it with? What was happening? And I go through this process. And this is what I'm talking about, the deep work. I mean, I love the superficial, because the superficial is a gateway and it has a place. Our problem in society, I feel, is that we spend too much time in the superficial. That's the issue, where we lack that depth. It's like, I gave this as an example the other day for something else, but it's like making a cake with no flour. The superficial is one ingredient, depth is up, and there's different ingredients that come with depth that have to be there in the equation of our human expression and construct in the world. And so that's why I love going to depth, because it's liberating. I don't want to fuck around and waste time in the superficial. I want to be there for as long as we need to, and then let's just go where we need to go. Let's have this human experience. Let's do it together. Let's grow together, because we're relational beings, and that's how we're going to extend ourselves and really move into the realm of a new potential, or our authentic potential that we tap into by going into the unknown. And that's the depth for me. And I don't take people where I haven't gone myself. I go to uncomfortable places. I've been to very dark places in my life. That's been part of my journey. That doesn't mean everyone has to. It's been part of my journey, because I then have that capacity to hold people through their darkness. It doesn't scare me. It doesn't shake me. It's not unfamiliar to me. I've been to the brink of suicide many times. I've pulled myself out. I've had the assistance and guidance of so many others. And so it's familiar terrain for me. And I believe one of the reasons, not coming from a place of ego, but that I've been put on this earth, is to help people move through their own internal suffering and realize that they don't have to suffer so much. It doesn't have to be so intense. And they're safe, and they're supported, and they're held. And that's a big part of my journey.
Wow, that's so powerful. One, I could totally relate to what you're saying. When you're on the spiritual journey as well, like, you catch yourself, you catch your ego so quickly. And you're like, okay, I'm projecting my shit on this person over here. Totally been there. But also speaking to the deep work that you do, and obviously, having talked to Dan after he's done some of the deep work with you, 100%. Like, one thing I will add is, like, let's not, guys, like, I don't want to tell you that this stuff isn't really scary, and it's like almost traumatic in its own way, but once you do the work, like, the shifts are incredible. Yes, of course, you have to go into the darkness. You have to, but you're already there, really, if you think about it. You're already in pain and suffering. So if you do this deep dive, like, you'll be in pain for a little bit, but, like, my God, what comes outside of it, and how empowered you feel. And just, like, It is so worth it. It is so worth it to do the deep work. So I'm fully supporting it. I'm totally with you in that a lot of us are we want that easy. We want that kind of smooth sailing. Like, can I just do some affirmations and some journaling? And it's going to help you. Sure. But if you want to heal and you want to make a transformational change, you have to be willing to go into the depths of things. And yeah, so totally agree with all that. So in saying that then, do you think that people can heal on their own from significant trauma? Is it something that, like, let's say I've experienced a lot of trauma and I don't want to do that deep work. It's too scary for me. Can I heal it on my own? What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, that's a tough question. It's a great question and it's a tough question. And what I'm more inclined to say is that I want to come back to that statement I made earlier around us being relational beings. And so when we speak about codependence, I mean, the term codependence is quite specific. It's an unhealthy attachment or reliance on situations, circumstances, or other people that really determine our sense of self-worth and the way we care about ourselves and so forth. But to some extent, we're all quote unquote codependent. There's a spectrum on that as well. And you want to be on the low end of the spectrum where there's high involvement but low drag, and so you're not really attached to the outcome, you know. So like right now, you and I are codependent in a sense. I'm reusing the word in a different way, but we're having a podcast. You want an interviewee. I want to be on a podcast. I want to speak to you. So we're relying on each other. There's a sense of reliance there, right? So we're relational beings. Can one heal their pain or move into a state that is more desirable than undesirable on their own? I'm going to say no, and I'm going to tell you why. I don't think there's two main reasons. I don't think human collective consciousness is at that place yet. I think it's on its way. I think it's possible. But we're not meant to do stuff on our own. We're not meant to figure it out on our own. Like, even if you get a book, you're learning from someone else. Even if you sit in nature, nature is healing you, or nature is helping you heal. Yes, it's on your own, but you're not completely on your own. There's a distinction I like to make between solitude and isolation. And so during my own journey, there were many times where I felt isolated, and I was also in solitude, and I was also in support of other human beings. I'll explain the difference. Solitude for me is a very deliberate movement and action to be in and on oneself, to be with oneself for a very specific purpose of exposure or understanding or connection or feeling or whatever. Isolation is more victimization, and it's more we're in a state of victimhood, and it's also almost forced upon us. And we're too distressed mentally and emotionally to pull ourselves out of being alone. And so we feel that no one is there for us. We feel we have no one, we can't relate to anyone. And there's a helplessness attached to isolation and aloneness. Whereas solitude is a very deliberate, purposeful spiritual practice, or just a human practice of I'm going to be on my own because this is going to serve me and I'm going to grow from it. And then we have support. And we need elements of all of that, except for the isolation, of course. We don't need that. It's an undesirable state. But we need solitude and we need support. And so can someone heal themselves on their own? I just don't think it's, whatever you're doing, it's in relationship to something else. Again, whether you choose to go on this 24-month expedition of walking around the world because you want to heal some of your pains and you want to talk to shamans and cultural people, you're still relying on an action that involves environment and people. And so I think it's very hard to escape that. Even if you're a monk, you're learning from a particular lineage. Even if you're a hermit, you're relying on nature. But again, I mean, I wouldn't say hermits are healthy, because it's been proven that when we're not socialized in a healthy way, we're very unhealthy psychosomatically.
Yeah, I would agree with you actually as well, because I know a lot of people, I don't know, maybe there's like some embarrassment around speaking about their trauma, and they would
shame,
yeah, there's a shame around it. That's a whole different area. But I'm with you. Like, I think that in what we were discussing when you said like the work that you've done with Dan, it's like helping him to see when you're in the situation, when you're in the trauma, just by that fact alone, you don't see everything. And having someone who is trained and able to take you through the processes is going to help you see things in a different way, even change your perspective. It's something that you cannot step out of your body to do on your own. We're too biased in that situation. So yeah, I agree with you. I think it's always a collaborative thing. And then there is the times where you do that healing on your own by choice. But I think to heal from something, especially if you've been living with it all your life, it's always a better option, guys, to reach out to someone that you trust and that is qualified to do this, to help you through the process if you really want to make those changes. Okay, look, I could talk to you literally forever, and I feel like we like barely touched on everything I wanted to discuss with you. Like, I love our conversation so much, but one thing before I go that I really wanted to just bring up was I watched a video of yours and I was like, yes, I loved it. And I want this to go viral. So like, if you can send this to me, I would really appreciate it so that I can share it as well.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
It's the don't man up.
Oh, yeah.
I love that. I don't know how I missed that on my feed. So can you talk to that?
Yeah, for sure. It's really just a spin. It's not a spin. It's not a jest or playful or clickbait or anything like that. It's legitimately, I believe, so for men and masculinity, I believe very strongly in being hearty and being sturdy and stable and being resilient and fucking being tough in the physical body. I think it's a big part of masculinity. I believe that's connected to our biological evolution and our lineage. I believe we're doing a disservice to ourselves and to the feminine when we're not solid in our bodies, when we're not connected to and have faith in who we are in our bodies. It doesn't mean you have to be the fastest man on earth or the strongest man on earth or anything like that. It's just that you have a connection to your physicality. And so I'm a big fan of that. And so I'm also an advocate of stoicism and the expression of stoicism in today's world with some adjustments too. And so manning in, really, in short, the shortest way to put it is that man's journey, specifically man's journey, has very much been one of outer exploration. One of man's greatest gifts is his ability to explore and be curious about the world. It's actually one of the ways that we create. Our curiosity fuels our creation, and that's where we can, quote unquote, match women in their creation. I mean, we can't match women in their creation of birth and giving life and so forth, but our version of that, whatever version it is creating in the outer world. And so it's curiosity and exploration that fuels that. And so manning in, for me, the next evolution of man is the exploration of our inner world, of our hearts and our souls and our spirituality and a new way of being in the world, in parallel with whilst we're exploring the depths of the ocean, the heights of the mountains and the outer cosmos. It would literally, whilst we're discovering new planets and discovering new habitats outside of our Earth, that's all good and well. But if we're not making that inner exploration and choosing to see ourselves for who we truly are, then we're going to lose a key aspect of our humanity. And so for me, manning in is about starting to go inwards now. It's really starting to be deeply reflective. The ancients knew this. They would reflect every day on who they were, how they were being, how they treated others, how they treated themselves, what their thought processes were, what their ideologies and beliefs were. They were deeply introspective. The industrial era came, or, I mean, it's not just the industrial era, but as an example, and we got swept away with economics. We got swept away with socioeconomics and technological advancements. I have nothing against that. We're able to do this on an amazing piece of equipment, multiple pieces of equipment. It's how we use technologies. A pen is a technology, a phone is a technology, a sacrament, a plant medicine is a technology as well, so to speak. It's a way to advance us, but how are we using it? Because people use plant medicines as addictive street drugs as well. They just replace one for the other. So how are you using it? And so manning in for me is that inward journey. And I think when man becomes more and more reflective and he starts taking a deep level of responsibility and ownership for who he is in the world, his magnificence, his brilliance, and some of the shit that we've done as a collective that hasn't been great, and there's no judgment there. And I know by saying it's not great, there's a judgment, but there's no emotional charge behind it. We start taking ownership of that. We can start then being very real. Again, if you don't see what you've done, who you are, who you've been, etc., how can you make a change? Because you're not acknowledging it. And so that acknowledgement is a key piece, and it's an inward evolution and revolution of self. And that's, for me, is manning in.
I love that, because I think that manning in really is manning up.
It's a true version of it.
It's a true version, because when we say man up, and sometimes I cringe because I hear fathers saying it to their 6-year-old son, and I'm like, oh my goodness, when he's showing emotion or when he's being vulnerable. And I'm like, we need to change that. And
manning up is suppressive. That's what manning up basically says. And again, there's nothing intrinsically wrong with, there's nothing wrong with saying, hey, stop complaining. But what we're really trying to say is, how about seeing your life in a different way? Or what we could say is, go through your feeling, go through your process, and then can you see and feel and experience life in a different way? But manning up is an immature way of saying, suppress your shit, ignore it, no matter how much pain you're in, and just get on with life without even thinking about it. But that's not how the brain works, and the brain body doesn't work like that. It suppresses and it stores, and it still impacts us at a subtle levels. And so that pain you were talking about before, instead of being short intensity like maybe CrossFit, it's this ultra marathon type of intensity that we keep experiencing. So we get to choose, do we want to suffer long term, or do we want to suffer a short time, move through it, and experience ourselves in a completely different light? And manning up really suppresses our truth and who we are. And it's an immature way of looking at life.
Yeah, definitely. And also I find that when we say things like that, like obviously the manning up thing is more so a father figure type thing, saying it to a younger male. And it just shows that poor soul hasn't also done the work, like it's projecting, it's an insecurity in usually the father, who is like, it's an attack of his ego. Like, my son is not manning up. This is embarrassing to me. I need him to man up. And yeah, so I mean, that's a whole other conversation on conscious parenting. But
it's a very valid point.
I absolutely love that video. So, and I really want to share it. So,
send it to you.
Awesome. Thanks so much. And Steph, I know we're out of time. I just want to thank you so much for making the time today. And I will have all your website and social media handles in the show notes, guys. And before we go, I would just love for you to share, what project are you most passionate about right now sharing with everyone?
Yeah. Oh, wow. There's probably, a few actually, but yesterday we started our first iteration, Christine and I, of Be the Queen. And it was just, again, I've just found myself crying the last couple of days. I just tears of gratitude, seeing 58 women just fully show up. And it's not about, we don't promise them that they're going to find a man at the end of this journey. It's not about that. It's about the self-awareness, the deeper levels of self-awareness they're cultivating. They're raising their own vibration, their own sense of self, their own sense of self-worth. They're clearing out the clutter of the past, looking at the subtleties of their life and where they can be evolving and improving and growing. And to see, and we did a 2-hour webinar last night, there's 58 women, 57, 58, or 59, 58, I'm pretty sure it's 58 women just show up fully ready and just so vulnerable and raw and open. And for me as a man to hold that space and to be the only man with all these women, and it's just such an honor, and it's so humbling. And so both Christine and I just are so empowered and energized with that right now. Just so excited on so many levels. And we'll do another one in probably March. But this is going to be a big part of our service, is really helping women just understand men and know men, but really know themselves and go deeper into who they are and really cultivate that self-worth that they deserve and who they are. And then just my focus at the moment, really, I'm doing a lot of one-on-one work. I know from a business perspective, it's not the, so to speak, smartest thing to do, because it's not scalable and it's not blah, blah, blah. Anyway, it's time for money exchanging. But anyway, I love it and it deepens my practice, and I'm really thriving and vibing in it and jiving in it right now. And so it's a big focus for me, is just select few people and just going deep and going really, really deep with them. And I'm finding that is evolving massively, where I'm getting more and more people approach me because I'm so connected to it. And then next year I've got some really powerful stuff going on with men as well, and some men's work and some co-ed work as well that Christine and I will both be doing. So there's a few things there that we're really excited about.
That's amazing. And any kind of links that you can share with me, I'll also put them in the show notes, guys, so you can reach out to Steph. Steph, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Marcia. I appreciate you.
Okay, guys, I hope you got some powerful takeaways from this episode. If so, please share it with someone. And if you haven't done so already, please subscribe and review, as it helps us to spread our message of inspiration. Sending you so much love, and I'll see you on the next episode of The Hustler's Guide to Flow.